Hello and welcome to this presentation, Qualifying for an IEP, A Parent's Guide to Understanding the Special Education Evaluation Process. This presentation is being brought to you through a collaboration between South Dakota Parent Connection and the South Dakota Department of Education. My name is Chris Sellers, and I am an outreach specialist with South Dakota Parent Connection. Our objectives for today are to understand the legal definition of a disability under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Act, and the specific criteria used by schools to determine if a child is eligible for an individual education program. Our second objective is to learn the stages of IEP eligibility process, including referral, evaluation, eligibility determination, and development of the IEP. So you know what to expect and how to participate effectively. The third objective is to become equipped with the knowledge and tools to communicate effectively with school personnel, to be able to ask informed questions, and to actively advocate for your child's needs throughout that IEP process. Qualifying for an IEP. The purposes of evaluations are to gather information so that teams can make decisions about eligibility, educational strategies, and placement. Prior to this presentation, South Dakota Parent Connection offered another presentation on evaluations and reevaluations. It's kind of the prequel to this one. So if you would like to view that to gather more information on the evaluation process, it can be found on the South Dakota Parent Connection website. Today's presentation provides information on what happens following the evaluation. How are decisions made? The Individuals with Disabilities Act, or IDEA, lists several categories of disability that are the basis for eligibility for special education services. What happens when evaluations are complete? When evaluations are complete, a group of individuals involved with the assessments, including the parents, decide if the child qualifies for special education services. Something important to note for parents is that prior to this meeting, it is important for you to have a copy of the evaluation reports so that you feel that you are prepared to be able to ask questions. You can write notes on it, highlight parts of it that maybe you're unfamiliar with or don't really understand, so you can be sure to address those during the meeting. Children can be determined eligible for services based on one or multiple categories. The team will use state rules to decide if the child qualifies for special education. State and federal regulations will guide whether a child qualifies for special education services. So that's kind of what this meeting is about. The evaluations are complete. Now the team will sit down and discuss how or if the child is eligible for special education and/or related services. So when the team sits down, it's time to make that decision on, is this child eligible for special education services based on the results of the evaluation, as well as those policies regarding eligibility for special services. So you'll go through all the evaluation reports, talk about how the child functions in the classroom and in the school setting, gather information from outside sources if needed, talk about what's going on in the home, what teachers observe and staff observe in the classroom. The school will discuss your child's scores on tests and evaluations, and they will explain what those mean. So is your child doing as well as other children his or her age? What do they do well in? Where is your child having difficulty, and what might be causing that concern? In the state of South Dakota, we have 13 categories of disability that a child can qualify under. Those include the following: autism spectrum disorder, deafness, emotional disability, hearing loss, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, traumatic brain injury, vision loss, developmental delays, and that is for children who are ages 3 through 8, or speech and language. And for more information on these different categories of disability, you can go to the South Dakota Department of Education Disability Guide. And as you can see, that website is listed here. Determining eligibility. When we talk about not only the scores, but what else do we need to consider when determining if a child is eligible for services? We consider it a three-pronged eligibility determination for special education. The first one is, does the child, through the scores, the observations, and everything we've learned about that child, do they have a disability under one of those 13 disability categories that we just reviewed? The second one is, does the disability adversely affect the child's educational performance? The third one is there then a need for special education services? Is the need specific enough that that child would qualify for supports and services through an individual education plan? So this means that the school looks at, first of all, whether the child does have a condition like a learning disability, autism, ADHD, a speech or language delay, or something else that might affect their ability to learn through one of those 13 disability categories that we talked about. The second one, prong two, does that disability affect the child's ability to learn and do well in school? So even if the child has a diagnosed disability, it also must be shown that it actually affects their schoolwork. Maybe they're struggling with reading, with writing, behavior, making friends. Is that connected to their disability? The third part, does the child need special education and related services to learn? The school will ask whether the child needs extra help beyond what the regular classroom teaching can provide. So that could be things like speech therapy, a special reading program, the need to learn in a smaller group setting. All of those things will be considered when determining if a child does qualify for special education services. For a better understanding of your child's test scores, and even to better understand the different types of tests that are given in the school setting, South Dakota Parent Connection has a guide called Understanding School Testing and Test Scores. This can be downloaded into a hard copy, or you can review it online on our website. So that can provide you with a lot more information and might be worth reviewing prior to going into an evaluation meeting which determines eligibility for your child. Following a meeting to determine eligibility, what happens if your child is not eligible and you still have concerns? If the child is not eligible, the school may suggest a 504 plan. Now, a 504 plan can be a list of accommodations that can be used in the general education classroom. So they're kind of some interventions that are used that can help level the playing field for your child. Some examples of some 504 plan accommodations could include extra time on tests or assignments. Maybe that your child needs some breaks during the day. Do they need to take tests in a quiet room? Do they get easily distracted where they don't do as well when there's too much going on in one setting? Do they need some fidgets or some sensory tools to help them focus? Would they benefit from using a calculator or a spell checker? Would it be better for them to have preferential seating? For example, if a child has ADHD, it's oftentimes suggested that they sit in the front of the classroom in the middle so that there are fewer distractions for them and they are closer to the instructor. They might need some visual schedules or some instructions that are written for them to better accommodate them. So those are just some ideas for a 504 plan if a child does not qualify for special education services. Another option, if a parent does disagree with the findings of an evaluation that was performed by the school district, they can request an independent education evaluation. So that is something that if you ever have concerns about that, you can talk to your school district, or you can also call us here at South Dakota Parent Connection, and we can advise you on how to follow up with that. If a child is determined to be eligible for special education services, then the team will write or draft an individualized education program for that student. The team includes the IEP team, which is the individual education program team, includes the child's parents, teachers, and other school personnel. The IEP team develops an individual education program that is tailored to meet your child's needs based on the evaluation results, and it includes specific educational goals, services, and accommodations for your child. When that IEP or individual education program is written, it is reviewed at least once a year to monitor the child's progress. Parents also will get progress reports at the same time as children get report cards. The child also has to be re-evaluated to determine if they continue to qualify for services, and that needs to happen at least every 3 years. Once a child is determined to be a child with a disability, parents also do have the right to refuse special education services. Now, prior to the provision of the initial provision of providing services, written consent has to be provided from the parents. So the only IEP requiring parental consent prior for implementation is the very first IEP. Parent consent is legally required for that IEP. Some tips for parents whose child is on an individual education program or an IEP. It's really important to keep records of all communication and evaluations. Ask questions during meetings. You are an equal part of the team, and we want you to come to that meeting feeling like you're a part of the team, prepared to ask questions. Ask if there's things you don't understand, have it be repeated. Try not to feel like you're being rushed, and if you need more time, just say, hey, we need to go back and talk about that part again. I just really didn't understand the last part we talked about. Feel comfortable and free enough to be able to do that. You can bring an advocate or support to meetings. Best practice would be for you to advise the IEP team or the case manager if you plan to do that. And following a meeting, if you do not agree with decisions that were made with that meeting, you do have the right to appeal. I hope this presentation helped you better understand what happens following evaluation for special education services and how decisions are made, how children qualify for services, what we need to consider, and what the rules and regulations are regarding qualifying for special education services in the state of South Dakota. And we do have a follow-up for this. If a child is eligible for special education services and they go on to an individual education program plan, we do have more information for you in a presentation, which is called Helping Parents Understand the IEP Process. So I would hope that you would go ahead and just refer to that on our website, the South Dakota Parent Connection website, if needed. Thank you for attending, and I hope that this information was helpful and useful for you as you navigate the following an evaluation and the meetings that are done to determine whether or not your child qualifies for services and what happens in an individual education program. Thank you so much for attending. Got it right down.